Hello guys, today I want to talk about a specific issue that's been bothering me for quite a while now. However, I never got to talk about it because it's controversial and it has a slightly complicated nature, which has been putting me off of doing the video. However, I think it's not going to get any easier over time, so I might as well do it now, which is racism against white people. Now, it's only fair I give a little bit of historical analysis before I go about this, and before I begin the video, I just want to say that racism, or discrimination overall, regardless of what the reason is wrong. To base someone based on values such as gender, sexual preference, ethnic, skin tone, religion, place of birth, and things like that is wrong. And if you need to criticize someone, let it be by their actions, not because of things like these that are either part of how they were raised or things they cannot change. So, or that by nature they just are. So here's the historical background to this. Over history, different ethnics have fought about against different ethnics or against different peoples because of things such as religion, politics, economics, just general racism against one another, and so on. And white people happen to have done a lot of this between the 16th and 19th centuries due to the amount of due to the technology they had that allowed them to do it in a much larger scale and make slaves and so on. So obviously in the 20th century there was a lot of movements that tried to negate many of the bad aspects about it in different parts of Western society. One of the most remarkable is the black movements in the USA, led by Martin Luther King and other good people. However, in modern society, and before you criticize me, just give me a moment. Racism is a much smaller issue than it used to be back then, and for the most part is a minor issue in modern society. It's not as big as media might make you think. Now, because of this racism over time of white people against other ethnics, obviously people of these ethnics have had individuals that are not happy about it, and in modern society there's a lot of people, especially on the internet, that are criticizing white people essentially for just being white people, which is again unfair. This kind of aggression and violence is just going to generate more hatred towards these specific ethnics for extremists. So I generally just avoid doing any kind of racism based on like this. Now, to actually talk about this a little bit more, we need to divide it between two different aspects, which is society and media. In terms of society, at least in Western society, as far as modern Western society is concerned, racism has become a much minor issue, especially in my own experience in Europe. While there will always be some racist people because due to particular bad experiences or the way some people were raised up in ideologies that were against specific kinds of people, for the most part, it's a minor issue. As far as I know, as far as I've experienced, at least in Western society, and I've read about and I talked about with other people. So it's a minor issue in Western society. In other societies, it may be different, but at least this video concerning Western society, for the most part, discrimination has become a much smaller thing than it used to be, specifically in racism. I'll talk about feminism and other kinds of discrimination and discrimination in different types in a future video. However, this is specific to racism against white people. Now, again, it makes sense, and there's a historical reason why people may criticize white people because of these actions. However, you must remember, first, this is not the same society it was back then, and second, you can only criticize specific individuals rather than just in general society, because not everyone partook in such bad actions such as enslavement or just generally killing people because of such a stupid reasons as them being a different skin tone or have a different complexion of the face or whatever. Now, the second aspect about it has to do with media, and this you could consider it to be a little bit less important, but I think it's really unfair on many people. So I'm gonna go about it. And in many pieces of work, just because there's not a huge plethora of different ethnics, or because the only one happens to be white, ironically enough, if it was only black people or Asian people, it's generally not criticized as much, at least in Western society anyway. Because there's not such a big variety, that many pieces of work are considered to be inferior to the ones that may have them. However, I want to bring out two examples to show that this is not necessarily a thing that shows how good a piece of work is. The good example would be Witcher 3. Witcher 3 happens to be the most recent game in the Witcher trilogy, and it's based on the novels by Andrzej Sapkowski, who bases much of his work on Polish history, culture, and mythology, and in a way it's a celebration of the national identity of Poland, which is great. Any kind of national celebration like this, without trying to bring out the negative traits as good traits, for instance, animal violence, is great. If it brings out the good virtues of it, as a kind of celebration of national identity, that's awesome. However, due to the nature of this, because of Polish culture over time has been mostly white people, because there's been Slavic people, Germanic people, and those were the two major ones. Again, obviously most of the people there were white, and many of the neighbors of the Polish people were again white. So it only makes sense that in the Witcher universe, at least specifically where it's playing part, which is the Northlands, I do not remember the name right now, but it only makes sense that in that region there's mostly white people. Now there's also the Skellige Islands, which are based on Celtic and Germanic people, but again these people have historically been white. So it only makes sense that if the author is to base it on history, it makes these societies relatively similar to the ethnic that they were in the real world, which again is white people, even though they are different ethnics such as Germanic, Slavic, and Celtic. Now, the funniest thing about this is that there is regions with different ethnics, including African. However, they happen to be different regions that are further away from where the game is taking part of. And because of the nature of the game, which is mostly based on a medieval society, not completely, because there are some medical anachronisms and such, and also this fantasy, there's obviously not going to be the same quality of roads that there is nowadays, which only makes traveling harder, but there's also the really dangerous wildlife, which makes any intention of traveling much minor, because again it's dangerous to move from anywhere to anywhere. So obviously societies become a little bit more isolated than they are in the real world, which only makes sense. A bad example about variety though is a piece of work recently by J.K. Rowling, which is a portrayal of the skin changes from North American, I think Inuit it was, mythology. Skin changes in Inuit mythology, I don't remember exactly, but please do not criticize me over something like this, are shown to be evil spirits. However, in J.K. Rowling's portrayal, they are basically compared to animals, which are not necessarily bad. Now, because of this, obviously, North American native tribes have considered to be offensive because essentially it's misrepresenting their culture, which I completely understand. So sometimes this variety, if you're not able to do the proper amount of research or devote yourself to, can actually make a piece of work less valuable. And this is not to criticize J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling is a really great author, understands the human mind, especially children's mind, really well in the Harry Potter series, and has a really, really, really good grasp of British mythology and folklore. However, when it comes to other folklores and such, she's not as good. So obviously, well, at least in my opinion, she probably should have stayed more with that particular mythology and folklore, which is that of the British Islands. Now, after going all over this, this is the last thing I want to mention about media regarding racism. Many times there's characters that just are shown to show that there's a diversity of different peoples regarding ethnics or sexual orientations and so on. And many of these times, just because they're basically they're just shown to show that there's variety, they become stereotypes and cliches. So sometimes having just this variety just for the sake of having variety, again, weakens the quality of the work. So if I were to give a main message about media, it's essentially having variety does not make a work of fiction great. What makes a piece of fiction great is essentially achieving whatever it sets itself to. For instance, a comedy is good if it happens to be funny, or horror if it actually happens to frighten you or disturb you in some way, or romance if it happens to, I don't know, be satisfying in some way, in the way that the relationship or the lack of relationship develops. A piece of fiction should be criticized based on how well they achieve this goal. Obviously, every piece of fiction does a different thing. For instance, you cannot compare Lord of the Rings with Game of Thrones, even though both they're both fantasy, because they happen to have really different central themes. One of the central themes of Game of Thrones is that one of the Valyrian phrases, which is Baer Morgulis, I think it is, which essentially means all men must die, which is not so. Again, it's not that big in Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, to put it quite simply, is really simplistic in terms of the fights against good against evil. It's more about the hero's journey rather than a central theme like this. So different pieces of fiction set themselves to do different things, and just because they don't happen to have a great variety or happen to have a specific ethnic does not mean that they are bad. Now, getting rid of media altogether in terms of fiction, I want to just go full circle and go back to the very beginning. Any kind of racism is wrong, whether that be against black people, Asian people, white people, whatever people you may be doing racism against is wrong. Any kind of discrimination based on stupid things like this is wrong. You can criticize specific individuals because of the actions they have taken, but you cannot just go and criticize a whole a whole group of people because of something like this. You can criticize actions. You can criticize, I don't know, you can criticize how they treat women. You can criticize how they treat animals. You can criticize how bad they deal with the environment and nature. You can criticize these specific things and in specific individuals based on their actions. However, not every person in that society is going to partake in these actions. So, for instance, I don't know, most people in the UK consume meat. But that doesn't mean every single one does. For instance, there's vegetarian people and there's vegan people. You cannot just judge the whole bunch of people because of one or two apples, or you cannot judge the specific apples because of the whole group, or the majority of the group. So again, I just want to, with this video, just encourage people to stop doing this kind of racism. I completely understand why you may have aggression towards these people, because in the past there's been individuals from those societies, European societies and American societies, that have partaken in doing this kind of discrimination. It's something not to be celebrated, discrimination of this type, or any type really. However, you cannot just judge a whole society based on the lowest denominators. You cannot just say every white person or every black person or every Asian person or every brown person or every particular kind of people to be bad based on something as stupid as that. Because not everyone has done something regarding that. So I'm sorry that this video was as serious as it is, and I've been going essentially over the same point again and again, and to some people this may just be common sense. However, I'm particularly fed up with this because modern media, many times including big companies such as BuzzFeed or YouTube channels, are just criticizing things because they include white people, or criticizing specific people because they're white. It's not. You cannot. If you cannot do it to black people, if you cannot do it to Asian people, why you should be able to do it to white people? You cannot have this kind of hypocrisy and double standards. It's just wrong. Any kind of discrimination of this type is wrong. Criticize specific people because of actions they've taken that are bad, Do not judge people based on their skin tone, their origin, their religion, or the worldview. So that's how I want to end the video. Hopefully next video will be happier, and I will be talking about different types of discrimination, including sexual orientation and feminism, hopefully. However, at the moment, I'm done with racism, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.